Hi, my name is Yandea, and in January 2024, this year, on January 15th and 16th, I had near-death experiences. So how it started out was basically I was pregnant and I started having bleeding. So my husband brought me to the emergency. That was January 15th. And he brought me to the emergency, and it took a very long time, over 3 hours, for me to be seen. And I just kept getting heavier, stronger and stronger contractions. And finally, they let me into a room to see a doctor. And at that time, I did end up miscarrying the baby. I wasn't really examined or anything. I was just given stuff to clean up and then sent home. So before leaving the hospital, I went to the washroom. And while I was in the washroom, I started feeling very cold. Like my hands were getting cold, my feet were getting cold, and then I just couldn't feel them. So I ended up leaving the washroom, and my husband was waiting outside for me, and I ended up collapsing into his arms and onto a chair that was there. And all I remember really experiencing was being in darkness. And at first it was just darkness, but then it started to give me that feeling like I was underwater, not because I could actually feel water, but when I looked up, I could see there was like a circular light that was outside of something that really and truly is the same way as if you were think of being under a pool or under a lake and you would look up and see, you could tell where the moon was outside of the water. That's kind of how it was. I looked up and I could see what looked like waves, and I could see my husband on the other side, and there was light on that side. So I started just like going up to this, not really swimming, but like having the intention to go up to the light. And when I went up to the light, I could clearly see that he was on the other side. I could see him, but he couldn't see me. And he was just looking like down into me, I guess, trying to look into my eyes. And I was looking up at him and wanting to go out of this place that I was in, but I just couldn't get to him. And after a while of trying to go across this barrier, I just got really tired and I just like sunk back into the darkness. And next thing I knew, I was hearing the nurse's voice and I was being like revived, I guess. And it just felt like I was waking up, like my eyes were just opening. It literally felt like if you were sleeping and someone started waking you up and your eyes are just like, opening to the light. And that's what I experienced. So after that, they kind of just checked me out, checked out my blood pressure and stuff. And they said, okay, well, you must have just fainted or whatever. So they sent me home. And when I got home, I continued to bleed. I bled so much. By the end of this experience, I had lost over 40% of my blood. So I was hemorrhaging, and I told my husband, like, this is not normal. I've actually had a miscarriage before, and we've experienced this, and this is not normal. My body is not supposed to be bleeding out this much. So he said, well, let me move you into the bedroom. And I remember just slightly trying to lift my head off of because I was laying on the couch, and immediately the darkness was just coming again. I could feel exactly a repeat of what had happened earlier when I was in the hospital. So by the time we got home, it became the 16th because we got home like after 1 o'clock a.m. And so at this time now we're looking, it's probably like closer to like 3 o'clock in the morning. And he says, you know what, I'm gonna just call 911. And at that time, I just went into this place again. I just totally lost consciousness and I went back into this realm that I was trying to avoid. But this time I wasn't underwater. At least it didn't feel like I was in that same place. It felt like I was in a room, but there were no walls, but everything was contained. Whatever I was being shown was all just in this area. And I didn't see any being, standing in front of me, but I could feel the presence of someone. I would call that person God. But, I didn't see any bright lights or anything like that. I just felt this presence with me. And with the way that things were moving in front of me, it's the same way that us who have hands would move things. So in this place of darkness, I saw all of a sudden in front of me was like this. Like the same way someone would deal cards to you. This is why I said I didn't see hands, but the movements that were happening in front of me were the movements that would happen, if someone had hands. So it was like this in front of me, just like slides of light, you know, like slides of light were just being thrown like this in front of me. And each of the slides, I could see portion of my life from the time I was born all the way until that present time. And I was looking at them and I remember feeling very happy because everything I was seeing, like all of the images were all good images. And, you know, a lot of it was like healing and like the things that I do with people now and some family memories, like just different things. You know, I was thinking, wow, this is really great. I've done such good things in life. And I remember knowing that the place that I was in is the place where this life or these images get looked at or get weighed is actually what it felt like. So I was waiting for these hands, you know, to come and gather these images and to see what they were worth. And it happened. The hands came. Remember, I didn't physically see hands. It's just the sensation or the feeling of, you know, what hands would do. But came and gathered the slides from this end to that end and brought them together. And instead of doing this, like I was expecting for it to literally be like, yeah, this is good. This is a good weight. I don't know. This is what I had in my mind when I was there. And instead of doing that, everything just came together and just like kind of collided and just disappeared. And I remember thinking to myself, what? Like nothing? Like how could it be worth nothing? And then I remember quickly thinking, well, all of these great things that I did, you know, I did them because of the Spirit of God, right? Like I know that it was the gifts that I have and all of this. So I can't really take credit for my gifts, right? Because they come from God. So it was like, okay, I understand, right? Not getting credit for that. But then I had a thought of what about being a vegetarian? At that time, I had been a vegetarian for 12 years already. And I was thinking, couldn't that be worth something? And immediately when I had that thought, I had another thought that was like the very fact that you're having this thought about, you know, you being a vegetarian being worth something or being counted as good is the reason why it's not counted as good. And I didn't even have to like wrestle with that. I knew immediately that like my heart was in the wrong place, you know, towards that. And then after that, I ended up coming back into my body. And at that time, my husband was still talking to, I guess, the dispatcher. And I was telling him, like, I can't hold on, like, I can't hold on. It was just this constant struggle because I kept going in and out of my body. And every time I would come back, it's like I'm trying to hold on to this realm. I'm trying to hold on to be in my body. And I just kept going back into this place. Another experience I had while I was in this place was like that same room. I never went into another room. Everything that ever took place was in this same place. But every time I would go back, it would be something different. So when I went back on this time, there was like this room was filled with people. I think as far as I could see, it was just filled with people, but they were organized in a way where the people who were closest to me, which were my husband and my 5 children, they were like super bright lights. They were super bright lights. I could see their form, but it wasn't like their physical features. It's just like their form, like their like light bodies, I guess. But I could tell who each light was, right? And so they were in front of me and they were the closest. And then it was like rows behind them, like rows all the way to the back and all the way out to the sides were just rows of people. And I knew that these were people that I had met over my entire lifetime. First, I had the thought of like, wow, that's a lot of people. I never would think that like all of these people would be here because some of these interactions were what I would call insignificant, but they were there. And they were organized in the way of the people who had the brightest lights were closest to the front, and then the dimmest lights, you know, went further back, right? And so I remember like really taking note of the light, you know, that was in front of me, which was my husband and my 5 children. And it's like the more I looked into their light, is the more I realized that the light that they were was actually love. And I realized like the more I looked into like, wow, this light is love. It's them, but it's love. I always thought love was, you know, an emotion. But I'm like, no, this is what everything is made of. Because whether the people there had bright lights or dim lights, everybody was made of light. So it was all like the same substance. And that substance was light, but it was love. And so I just was getting this whole understanding of what love is, and that love is not an emotion, but it's actually like what everything is made of. Like nothing is created that's not created from love. And so in that time too, I remember realizing that this thing that I was experiencing, this light, this love, this substance, this essence, I had felt it before too. I remember feeling it when I would give messages to some of my clients. Sometimes in our sessions, a loved one who had passed away would come and give a message. And I remember that this is the same thing that I feel. I never thought at the time when I was, giving messages that this was love that I was feeling, but I could feel it so clearly when I was on the other side that this is the same thing. So I had a knowing that if I could increase the love that I have right now with my children and my husband when I die, I could use that channel to communicate with them, since now I knew for a fact that love never ends, right? So I had this desire, but I was now on this other side, and I was very well aware that, I wasn't in my body and I was dying, and I just wanted to go back, into my body. I wanted a chance to be able to love properly. And so while I was in this place, I also was able to realize the difference between like why the light of my husband and children were so bright compared to the light of like my parents and other people who I loved that were there, but their light was more dim than the light of my husband and my children. And I knew that it was because I was giving more of myself, more of my attention, more of my presence to my husband and my children. So that caused their light to be brighter. And I wanted a chance to come back to this realm so that I could give them more of my presence, more of my attention. It was like, now I know how to love. Now I know how to do it. I can do it, and I could make our love just last forever. And so I remember feeling like I was being pulled back, like they were in front of me, but then I started going back away from them, away from the whole crowd. I was being pulled back. And there's no time or space in this place, but I was perceiving that I was being pulled back like 8 years, 8 years distance. And I could tell that at the 8-year mark, they wouldn't be able to feel that essence anymore. I was seeing that the light was getting dim, and I knew that they would remember me. I knew that they would remember me, but they wouldn't be able to feel me the way that they could feel me now. And that is the only time in this entire experience where I felt extremely, I don't know if the word is fearful, but it was like a mixture of like extreme fear and heartbreak all at the same time. Just the thought of like my family not being able to feel me and me not being able to reach them, like that whole thing. And so I really wanted to come back to earth, and I ended up coming into my body again, and my husband was still talking to the paramedics, and I didn't know that someone had already been like dispatched and all of that. I just said to him, like, this is crazy. Like, I cannot hold on. Like, I'm thinking I should come back into my body and there should be like paramedics there. Instead, he's still on the phone and I have like zero strength to hold on. And so I just said to him, like, you have to pray. I can't hold on anymore. I'm dying. I said to him, this is it. I cannot hold on. And I said, I have to leave a message for the children. So he got out his phone and he started recording. And I just, based on everything I had experienced and come to know on the other side and seeing my whole life review, I had some things I wanted to say to my children. And anyhow, and so I left that message for them. But I ended up saying to him, we need to pray. Can you please just pray? Let's ask. And I was like, I was willing to, I never begged really for anything, but I was willing to beg for my life, to get another chance to just love. And then he said, yeah, he would pray. And once he agreed that he would pray, I just went back into the darkness and I was there. And then the next time I came into my body, the paramedics were there. And I was so happy that I had come back into myself, like God heard my prayers sort of feeling, and they took me to the hospital. They were so great, they kept me awake and everything. And I was still very floaty for like 2 weeks after this experience. I would keep going in and out of my body, not back to that place, but just in and out of my body, just kind of feeling like recalibrating. I wanted to be here because, I love my husband, my children, and other people, but Earth was not feeling right. This realm was in such a great contrast to the other side, which is full of truth and love. And on this side just had lies, it just felt like I was coming from a place of truth and love into this realm. And there was just so much fakeness here, and so it's very hard for me to stay in my body. It just was really terrible. And so it took about 2 weeks for me to get grounded and to be back in my body. But a lot of things were happening. Like I was getting scriptures, were coming into my mind, and I was understanding them very differently. Like now that I knew what love actually was, even just reading scriptures in the Bible, it was everything is different. It's like a code, that needs to be understood, but you can't understand the Bible or any of these books that are actually spiritual books unless you understand love, because spirit is love, right? And so if you don't have love, if you don't know what love is, you can't understand anything that spirit is saying. So anyways, that in a nutshell is, what I experienced. I had a great doctor when I went back to the hospital who helped my bleeding to stop. And I've just been back ever since, sharing the importance of love and how important it is for us to forgive and to give our presence to the people that we love and the things that we love so that it could last forever, because love is the only thing that actually lasts. And that's my experience.